Hey Brian, you know why I like playing Go Fish so much?
No, but I guess you're gonna tell me.
Because the fours are always with me.
Oh my gosh.
Now that doesn't the setup of the joke doesn't relate to Star Wars at all, but our episode does. So I felt it was appropriate. You know, when you just stare like this, we have audio listeners. They can't see the
Oh
face that's
man, the
accompanying.
cringe is strong with this one. That's what I say.
But I
Yeah.
knew if I stared long enough, you would call out, and then the listeners would know that I'm just staring in disappointment at you
To
because
be
Mhm.
fair,
they're staring with us.
no response is a response.
Yeah.
That's true.
Crickets. You can add crickets in there.
I could, but I don't want to because that's work.
Okay.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TV Guys, the show that's got all the right moves in all the wrong places. I'm Matt,
I'm Brian.
And I'm Jeff.
and we are talking about Star Wars today because Star Wars deserves to be talked about. It lives in our hearts, it lives in our minds, and it lives in the Force. So
Oh, yes.
we brought back one of our special guests, one of our favorite guys here, Jeff Tharp from Elijah Fire / Elijah Streams. He had an awesome Elijah Streams episode today that I'm sorry, I didn't warn you ahead of time. I love the testimony that you shared with about your neighbor. And
Oh, yeah.
are you okay of bringing that in real quick before we jump into it?
Oh, absolutely. I have a neighbor, and he was walking his dog or trying to walk his dog, and I'd gone out to like take out the trash, and I saw him there, and he was very distraught. And so I was like, dude, I'm going to do something kind of weird. I was like, let's pray for your dog. Let's pray for your dog to be healed. And then I stopped and I look at him and I go, do you know Jesus? And he goes, oh yeah, but I'm not really, just kind of umming and uhing his way through it. And I stood up, and because I was crouching down and petting his dog, I stood up and I looked him square in the eyes. I go, do you know how much God loves you? And I just like kept honing in on it. And I just really felt like I was supposed to hone in on it. And his eyes welled up with tears. And he's like, I just feel like God's upset with me because I haven't really prayed to him, and I haven't really. And I was like, dude, God loves you so much. And it was just like a great opportunity to just preach the gospel to this guy and share the love of God with him, because that's what I do. That's what I do on my show. So it was just a great. I'm looking forward to more conversations with this guy. He just needs a lot of hope and joy in his life because he's lacking that. So yeah, it was great.
Well, for all of our listeners out there, it kind of reminds me of like Goodwill Hunting almost, because like I've had a number of times like this where it's like, okay, God loves you. And so like in Goodwill Hunting, what towards the end, then Robin Williams was like, it's not your fault, because like
that's
the
a
main
great
character,
scene.
he's hurt and he's
That's a
carrying this
great
trauma
scene.
with him. He's like, it's not your fault. And then Matt Damon is like, yeah, I know. But then he just keeps going, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. And just like he keeps saying that until like Matt Damon, you can see like he breaks and he lets it
Oh,
in.
it's such a good
And I've
scene.
had times like that. It's like, yeah, I know God loves me. I know God's for me. I know God likes me. And it's like, no, God
Yeah.
loves you. Yeah, I know. God loves you. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you just lose it. Yeah. Oh,
So nothing to do with Star Wars. But hey, guess what? This is our episode. This is our podcast. We can do what we want on it. So there you go. Take that and run with it.
Because I think at least most of our listeners are Christian that we know about.
Yeah.
And if you're not, you're missing out. It's fun.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, before we get started, I have something to say to one of your listeners who I gave me this long response, and quite honestly called me out for being a little too turning my nose up. And he's right. He was absolutely right, because I love Star Wars. I have a total joy of Star Wars. This is like the Book of Boba Fett. We're breaking down the Book of Boba Fett. And I was maybe a little too critical for how I typically am with Star Wars. And since I've let Book of Boba Fett digest, I've actually been like, you know what? Yeah, there was some structural issues, but I actually really enjoyed it. And I just wanted to say thank you to that listener for totally calling me out, because I was like, he got me. He totally got me. There was a lot of other things he mentioned about saying, oh, I hate the prequels and all this stuff. And you know what? Can't really do anything about that. That's fine. You don't have to like the prequels. I'm a strong believer in whatever Star Wars you like. Great. So
Is this the listener I think it is?
Yes, it is, Brian.
I don't know who this
but we're
is.
not going to say his name because
Yeah.
we don't want to give him that self-satisfaction.
But I wanted to say thank you to that listener for totally calling me out straight up. Thank you. I really appreciate it. You kind of whipped me into shape, and I appreciate it.
He'll know who he is anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because this is one he will listen to.
Yeah.
I didn't want to lead with this, but it is a good segue. No, I'm not going to lead with it. I'm going to save it. I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to save it. We are going to talk about it. But let's just start broad strokes. What did you think of Kenobi?
It was good.
Well, don't get much broader than that.
That's all we need to say.
Yeah,
Podcast over.
Yeah, done. Roll credits. Yeah. No, I agree with Brian. I think I actually really liked Kenobi. I thought it was great.
I just have that Wonder Woman 2 villain who is like, life is good, but it can be better. And
Yeah.
I just feel like that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
It was like, all right, I enjoyed the time I was watching it, but okay, I am going to go into this because I'm just ready with this rant.
Man. Let's get
I
into it.
am getting Disneyed out. Disney right now is lacking a quality control that is permeating all of their IPs and everything that they're putting out. They're like, I realized it when I watched Thor, and I realized as I was watching Thor, I wasn't enjoying it. I didn't like it.
Yeah,
and
I have thoughts on Thor. I just saw it. I haven't listened to your podcast on it, but it was the weakest of all the Thor movies by far.
Oh, it was the
Absolutely.
weakest of a lot of Marvel movies, to be completely honest. Yeah.
And I haven't like hated anything that Disney has done for like the last couple of years, apart from Eternals and Thor. And then just this being the second movie that I like actually hated, I started thinking back. I'm like, ever since Avengers Endgame, it's like Marvel and Disney and all they peaked. And now there's all this safety out there. And when they moved into Disney Plus and what they're putting on there, I guess I hated Monsters at Work too, the Monsters Inc. TV show. And I'm like, oh, this should have been better. But like all of this content they're putting out is just safe and is lacking like that true creativity that they used to be known for and like the true things that made Disney. When you have Minions 2 like doing really well and Lightyear kind of bombing, and you go back a couple of years and you tell someone like that was going to be the case, then you realize they're on a weird path. And it's just like everything has the same flavor. And that's what I felt with Kenobi. I wanted to like it more and I just couldn't.
Yeah. So I will say I understand where you're coming from. This is the one thing, okay, sounds contradictory to what I just said with the guy. I will say there's one unnecessary variable in Kenobi that was so unnecessary they didn't need it. And that was the whole Reva storyline. I just felt like you could have saved that character for something else, because when you have 6 episodes, you have to be very intentional about what you do. If I tell you, hey, we're going to make an Obi Wan Kenobi TV show, and Darth Vader's going to be in it. Who do you want to see?
More of Kenobi and Darth Vader.
Exactly. And so to me, I felt like anytime they weren't with Kenobi, they should have been with Vader, plain and simple. And I feel like sidelining the Reva thing and saving it for something else would have been better, because from a lore perspective, there was some interesting kind of breaches in continuity that it opened up, that I feel like if they would have just focused on that. That's all I'll say. Other than that, I mean, I loved the dynamics between, Kenobi and him kind of coming back into the Force, and Qui-Gon. I mean, I was beaming when I saw all of that. And then I thought the Leia bit was great. And then I thought Hayden Christensen killed it as Vader. I thought he did an amazing job. So
yeah, I thought that scene at the end where like his mask comes off and it's like you're hearing both Anakin and Vader, like that was a really, really great scene.
Yeah. And that's like, I get you're building up to that, but the buildup just had so much unnecessary fluff. Leia, I'm kind of hit or miss on, because they don't know how to write kids. They didn't know how to write Leia as a child. They wrote Leia as her Carrie Fisher type. And it's like, no, even as like a precocious child, she wouldn't be like this. Also, she wouldn't be able to outrun 3 people in a forest and then be like, oh no, there's a twig in front of me. What do I do?
Yeah.
I like the actress who played Leia. I think they cast her really well.
Yes.
But the thing, and you're talking about with the continuity, even without knowing all the lore and everything you guys do, getting into so many different avenues and trying to fit them in. Okay, this comes in between this movie and this movie. Like, it just opens up so many things of messing up continuity, or like, how come Leia never mentioned that she knew Obi Wan Kenobi as well in the original series? Well, because she didn't, and then they retconned it. And it's just, it kind of opens up all this kind of stuff.
Sure. So I felt like they did do a little. I liked the Leia bit. I felt like seeing her as a kid, I was like, yeah, I mean, she's acting very on brand to who she is. She's a very strong-willed individual. So to me, it worked. The chasing the kid. There's some people that probably have seen this online. I think it's on TikTok or something. There was somebody who re-edited that scene to where Flea from I don't know what his name is in the show, but I know who Flea is. So Flea is talking to her, and then the guys show up behind her and they just bag her right away. And I was like, that's how they should have done it, instead of trying to do some action sequence with her running and sliding around. And to me, because it was very, very unrealistic. But I thought they did a good job of explaining, like Obi-Wan explaining at the end, saying, hey, like, the fact that I'm out in the galaxy, this is a very dangerous thing. You knowing I exist is a very dangerous thing. You're going to have to keep it a secret. And here's why. And, so with her kind of playing the part of on a diplomatic mission, kind of saving face when she does the hologram reading, with R2 records her in A New Hope, and she says, long ago you served my father during the Clone Wars. But if you think about it, she was actually, so after watching Rogue One, I don't want to say anything, because did you guys know that Brian hasn't seen Rogue One yet?
It's okay. I mean, I've seen everything that comes before and after it, so I mean, how much can they really spoil?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so they kind of set up a little bit more background in terms of Bail Organa, Princess Leia's adopted father. He basically is tasked with going. He's like, I need to go back to Alderaan, but he essentially nods that he's appointing Princess Leia to kind of carry forward this message, to go help find Obi Wan Kenobi, and so I kind of imagine, her having to kind of save face, especially if she gets it. It's not something you can kind of throw around like, oh yeah, I know Obi Wan Kenobi. It's a really tight knit of who knows, because the Jedi are being hunted. So say the rebel blockade runner that she flies at the beginning of, or she's in at the beginning of A New Hope. I'm really trying to condense down and like not go high nerd. I'm sorry, Brett. So
no, but I do love that. Like, we just spent 5 minutes of you, well, not 5 minutes, but enough time of you. Like, this is why it's not a plot hole, everyone. This is why it works. It's my favorite.
So, but if she goes around and says, oh yeah, we're going to Tatooine to go pick up a Jedi. Well, if they get apprehended, which they do, the less people that know actually why they're there, the better, because it actually protects. So to me, it actually does work. And here's the thing. When I saw that they brought in Princess Leia, and then I heard the explanation as to why she had to keep it a secret, it's one of those things that you go, some people are going to be okay with it. Some people aren't, it's just the way of it. So, yeah.
We have harsher standards, I think, sometimes for our TV shows. Like, why wouldn't they think like that? Why didn't Jack and Rose both get on the door in Titanic? Well, they tried. Plus, they're in freezing water. They're not exactly thinking straight. It's like, they're not going to know exactly 100% how to do this right, even if us who have thought about it for 20 years, like, well, maybe if they did this.
Yeah, I get that, but my whole thing is just like, like they're not going to stop. They're going to keep making Star Wars things. And then it's just the thing that maybe it's just me being cynical, is keeps thinking like, well, if this whole adventure of X TV show happened, then how come, like, in the movies, they never mention this? I feel like they keep having to explain, okay, this is why they're never going to mention this in the future. That was already, that kind of stuff.
No, I get that.
It was easy with the prequels to be like, just wipe C-3PO's mind.
Yeah,
he's a droid. Yeah, wipe his mind.
You got it. That was played off for laughs. I like that though.
Yeah, and it fits. It was a great continuity. decision to make.
Because I mean, they could have just not had C-3PO in the prequels at all,
which in some regards might have worked a little better.
I mean,
Episode 2.
I mean, what did he do?
He shot a bunch of drones in episode 2 accidentally, but he did.
Yeah. And probably killed a couple of Jedi by accident, you know.
There's a chance.
Mhm.
There's a shot.
There's a chance.
I mean, they gave him a big moment in Rise of Skywalker, but I mean, that's about it.
Yeah, and I think that you do bring up an interesting thing. I mean, personally, I felt like he had a better purpose in, in the prequels, but in the sequels, he didn't really. I mean, he was kind of just there. I kind of feel like people don't quite know what to do with C-3PO, and I kind of like seeing him there. I mean, you know, but yeah.
I mean, he's a one-note character, and it's not bad, but it's very easy to get sick of. As like even in the regular movies, he didn't have a whole lot. He pestered R2. Like, yeah, we got introduced to everything in this world through the eyes of R2 and C-3PO, but then once they got connected, there wasn't much for him. So he hasn't really ever had a purpose in my eyes.
Yeah, he's just kind of there. I mean, I guess you do have a couple of there's some key moments in the original trilogy in each of the films where he does actually have a use. Yeah. Where you're like, well, I'm glad he was here. Like when he like in The Empire Strikes Back, for example, when he says to Han Solo when they escape from Hoth and they go through the asteroid field and they kind of take refuge in the cave, what they think is a cave. And he's like, should I power down? And Han Solo's like, no, I need to talk to the Falcon and find out what's wrong with it. And I thought that was interesting. They gave him a use where it's like, well, actually, he's the one that finds out what the issue is with the Falcon so they can fix it.
Well, and that little comment he makes there about, it's a strange dialect. And then I feel like later on, they used that line to use that whole storyline in Solo about the robot putting himself into the Falcon.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I think I'm cool with, and what we were talking about before we started recording with Rogue One, I was telling Brian that in my opinion, I feel like Rogue One did an excellent job of lifting up and reinforcing the original film, A New Hope.
Yeah,
agreed.
And adding a more emotional resonance to the things that happen in A New Hope, setting up some context so that things hit harder. And so I mean, for me, Solo did enough of that, even with the history of the Falcon, and so I'm totally okay with stuff like that. But I mean, I do understand what you mean about it being like there's just a lot. There's a lot of material out there now. A lot of and I feel like the stories are kind of becoming like the novels in the 90s where they became so convoluted. Like there's just like really crazy novels. And I feel like maybe we're just going to end up in that position with all the TV shows coming out and all that stuff too.
Except for this time, it'll be canon. I like, so these characters, like, I agree with you about Reva. If we're jumping back there for a second, I agree about Reva. I didn't feel like her character was solid enough. I did like the little flip that they did, but then they didn't use it, in my opinion. I felt like, you waited all this time just to have Darth Vader's back to you, and then you're going to attack him then? Like, that's not even this cold, calculated thing. Sure. That was just emotional, and like, you've been planning this for how long, and you're going to let emotions decide this. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So actually, to me, the most interesting character ended up being, weirdly enough, Owen. I liked Owen the most.
Right? Yeah. I did too.
Yeah.
And you only got 2 episodes with the guy.
Yeah, and it wasn't even, I mean, it was more like scenes, Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it made a lasting impact. Brian, how did you feel about Reva?
Reva, is that the third sister?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I thought she was interesting, and I liked her backstory about, because in the beginning it was really frustrating. It's like, why is she so obsessed with Obi Wan Kenobi? And then when you got her backstory that she was a Jedi and she thought that he abandoned her that was all really interesting. But I think what you said, that there was too much to fit into too little of time. Like that could be a whole series about her.
Like, I mean, yeah, because I think it would be an interesting story to tell about her character. The thing that I felt like didn't work though, and it was right from the beginning, is she was this hot-headed, defiant character, even within the Inquisitors. And to me, it was like this, well, duh, of course she ended up double crossing Vader.
Mm-hmm.
To where I think it would have been more interesting if you have this character, you see her and she's played really straight, like she's fully devoted to the cause, not trying to make any waves, obeying orders, doing what she needs to do. And then you see these moments when she does kill the Grand Inquisitor, and you're like, whoa, just out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden you see her work her way up to Vader, and then all of a sudden she just attacks him, and you're like, oh, whoa. And then you find out, then you can see the flashback. Maybe she's, he wastes her like he does. She's left at rock bottom. Then you get to understand who she is. To me, that would have made more sense. But even that story, they did a disservice to the character, because a lot of people had a lot of misplaced frustration, because it felt like they were kind of tarrying a little bit in the story. When, I mean, for me personally, 6 episodes, I was like, give me Kenobi, give me Vader. I want to see that, because that relationship, you don't need any build up to try and get the audience to care about these characters. They do. And that was the same issue I had with the sequel trilogy, where they relied too heavily on new characters to get you to care about, rather than introducing this new trilogy with the characters people already have an emotional engagement with. You don't have to do as much, so you can you spend less time doing that, more time building the story, going through exposition, doing fun stuff with those characters. So to me, that was like, they fell into the same trap a little bit with, hey, here's some new characters, care about these new characters, and here's why. And people are like, where's Kenobi, where's Vader? I want to see, so
Had some other good characters that were new. Like I was very interested in the point of view of the Empire general turned good, and her being that double agent. Thought that was a great start. I felt like it was unceremoniously ended, and that she died for nothing. I mean, they even say that in the episodes, like, well, then her death is for nothing, and it ended up being that way, and that's unfortunate. But between her and then Kumail Nanjiani, his character, I really liked him. I always like him. He's a funny actor.
I've been a fan of his comedy for a long time.
He pretty much got to be a Han Solo type, like kind of a fast-talking con man type. Like, I don't believe any of this mumbo jumbo. Although, if Jedis are being hunted as fiercely as they are, why are you pretending to be one? Pretend to be something else. Get a new con.
Yeah, well, he wasn't the brightest guy. No, but I did appreciate there was a little bit of even in that episode when he's introduced and then he decides to help Kenobi. You really doubt his sincerity. I remember seeing that episode and I was like, oh dude, I don't trust this guy. And he ended up actually helping them. So I thought that was kind of like a fun place to put the audience into, of just kind of doubting. I don't know if you guys felt the same way when he was like, go to this place. And,
I will say about thinking about the actor. So like I said, I've known about Kumail Nanjiani for a long time. He was a stand-up for a long time. And one of his jokes is kind of like almost coming true. He's talking about how he was walking one day and some racist person wrote down their window and said, "Hey, Kumar, where's Harold?" And he said, "I want to get to be famous enough to where I'm the reference that people would use to make fun of me." Like people would run down the window and say, "Who's this Kumail Nanjiani guy?" And I feel like he's been in a lot lately. He might be getting to the point where he can be his own racist reference.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever watched it, but there was on Netflix that Murderville, where it was Will Arnett as like a detective, and then each episode would be a brand new celebrity guest, and they didn't have the script, so that they were improvising all the way through all these scenes. And Kumail was in one of those episodes. And there was, I don't remember how they got to this situation, but Kumail was like talking like, Will Arnett was doing some accents or whatever, like not accents, but he was doing like impersonating people. He's like, well, what would you do if you were going to impersonate me or if you're going to impersonate a man from Pakistan? He's like, but don't be racist. And the other guy in the scene is like, well, good luck. And so he like Will Arnett like takes a second. He's like, hello. I moved to Pakistan when I was young from Britain. And like he goes that route. And they're like, there you go. All right.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I've never seen that show.
It's pretty good. It had like 3 really funny episodes and then 3 like okay episodes, and there's only 6 so far. But
wow, that's like 50 out of 50%. That's not.
It lives or dies on the guest. So
okay.
Well, I mean, you ask the Star Wars fandom what they like about it, you get 50-50 response anyways.
Right.
That is 100% true.
Yeah, I think kind of going back to what I said with I think I mentioned this in the Book of Boba Fett episode 2, but I just feel like a lot of times with Star Wars, there is a kind of a give it time aspect to Star Wars where people hate it for a little while outside of the original trilogy because it was the first of its kind. It's a culture, pop culture phenomenon. There's no way you're going to recreate those original Star Wars movies in popular culture. It's just not going to happen. The closest we've ever gotten, I think, is The Mandalorian. But even then, there's always this acknowledgement of the original trilogy being superior, right? So there is a give it time aspect. And because I went to Star Wars Celebration in Anaheim back in May, and I went to the Attack of the Clones 20th anniversary panel, and it had Hayden Christensen, Ewan McGregor, Tamara Morrison, everybody. It was awesome. The sheer love and excitement. There's thousands of people in this conference hall, and the sheer love for this movie now after however long, 20 years, was really kind of cool to see, because love it or hate it, it's here to stay. And that's kind of my philosophy with Star Wars is like, hey man, the sooner I can get to a place where I go, you know what, I like it, and I will find a way to explain in universe why these things exist, not just go, oh, it's a plot hole and they suck because they did it. It's like looking at it and going, okay, just for fun, hey, let's try and find an in-universe reason why or why not this happened. And it's actually kind of fun, and that's kind of the approach I took with the prequels even when they came out, which actually made me enjoy them more. But again, I understand if people don't like them.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think it's fun. I think everybody, if they're a nerd as on our level for different things, like your thing is Star Wars, Matt's thing is Back to the Future, like
Muppets, your Muppets.
Yep, I'm Muppets. Is you can find a way to find something to like in everything in it, even if you admit this is probably better than this thing, So I like that. And then people like you can tell people like me, because I'm like a mid-tier Star Wars fan, all the stuff that I missed.
Sure.
Yeah. It was great to see Flea from Back to the Future in this, and then Christopher Lloyd's going to be in Mandalorian season 3. Like, who's going to be in Andor? Michael J. Fox? Are we going to get Crispin Glover sitting in? I'm your density.
Yeah,
I hope so.
I was going to say Flea is from the Wild Thornberries, but I suppose Back to the Future as well.
He's also a huge bassist for a very popular band, but
among other things.
Yeah. We all have hobbies.
Yep.
And he doesn't suck as an actor. That's what's surprising.
No, he's actually not bad. He was in Baby Driver as well. He was
yeah.
Thank you for coming to our Flea
That's
episode.
A great movie.
TV guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, we were going somewhere, and I just derailed it with my Back to the Future talk. Where were we?
You were talking about finding the good in whatever your fandom is. Yeah. You're going to find a reason to like something from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But if you have to look too hard, you might not be as big of a fan of that thing as you think. I'm surprised at the Star Wars fandom, like just how much the Star Wars fandom fluctuates. And like everyone gets these expectations in their head of what Star Wars is. And that's completely fine. It can be, this is what Star Wars means to me, but that doesn't mean every other thing needs to fit those criteria.
Yeah.
It would be nice to get off Tatooine once in a while, but apart from
I
that,
concur. We'll get that with Andor.
So, really, correct me if I'm wrong. The only times we see Hayden Christensen's face, there was that flashback scene that kind of talked about how they fight, and then there's the end when the helmet gets cracked. Are those the only two times we see his face?
and in the Bacta tank. I mean, it's covered up by the.
Oh yeah,
And you also see him from afar when I think it's in episode 3 when they land on that kind of arid sort of desert brush planet where Vader shows up, but he kind of hallucinates and he sees Anakin in his robes kind of in the distance. That's the other time.
Okay. Because like a lot of it, I mean, I think I've heard that for a lot of it, Hayden Christensen actually was in the Vader suit.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because you build the tension on these two characters and these two actors that you know from the prequels. But for the most part, it could have just been anybody in that suit.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what is it? Is it David Prowse? Was that the
Prowse? Yeah.
Prowse?
I don't know. Yeah.
Got it. I mean,
Darth Farmer.
It was like, how many people can attribute playing Darth Vader to themselves? Like, I'd heard that like he thought it was going to be his voice, and then they just overdubbed it with James Earl Jones, which is brilliant.
Way better.
Yeah,
way better.
But is like they did have like a stunt guy in there for like the stunt scenes, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
And then for James Earl Jones, did they use him recording, or did they use like a voice modifier?
I feel like they would have used him, and then use the audio to mix their voices together for that scene.
Yeah, well, because I know that if you compare Vader in Rogue One, his voice, James Earl Jones' voice, which sounds, I mean, noticeably older because he's an old guy now. But hearing him in Kenobi, I'm pretty convinced they did this. It's like this de-aging voice AI, where they did it for Luke, Mark Hamill as well.
That's right.
In The Mandalorian and in Book of Boba Fett. Yeah. And so I'm pretty convinced they did that for him, his voice here too, because they can completely synthesize it too. I don't even think they need the actual voice actor. They don't need their actual voice anymore. Like it's pretty sophisticated. It's just crazy, man.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about the difference between his vocals when he was younger and older. Is like you can definitely hear. I noticed it for 2019 Lion King, because he does some of the same lines from the same Lion King because he's voicing the same character. And you're like, I know, I remember the exact timbre of your voice because I've seen Lion King so many times, and you can definitely hear the difference for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
We're talking about the guy from Sandlot, right?
Yeah.
That's the guy. Yeah.
No, the guy from the better baseball movie, What Dreams May Come.
Yeah, I've actually never seen all of What Dreams May Come. I've only seen like half of it.
It's pretty good. I'm not a big baseball movie guy, although weirdly enough, I loved Moneyball, which wasn't really about baseball. It was about accounting. Let's be real.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I just was not interested in that movie. I mean, I saw it, but
Oh, I loved it. But I'm a numbers guy. That nerdy stuff just really appeals to me.
Well, good for you, man. Good for you.
I'm gonna slap a badge of honor here.
Yeah.
I love stats.
Yeah. Yeah. So
this, I don't know if it was the case for you guys. For me, I don't know why I did this, but I felt like my brain was on nitpick mode a lot more with this show. And maybe that was just part of my whole Disney journey I've been on the last couple of years of just slowly being desensitized to them being as good as I think that they are or should be. But it's just like, I felt like there's so many different things, like, like the one gate that they pull up to when they're on that transport truck and they have to fight their way out. And it's like, you see the overhead shot. It's like, why couldn't they drive around it? Or they're walking. Why couldn't they have walked around it? Or he shoots like the gate that control there. And that's always been a problem in any sci-fi thing. You shoot like the panels, like that's supposed to control the entire door. Right. But it's like there's so many different moments of that where I'm like nitpick, and I'm like, I'm not having fun doing this. Why am I doing it to myself?
Yeah.
You know what? Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go for it, Brian.
Okay, so this is somewhat relevant, somewhat not, and it's going to come in. Just stay with me. So I used to listen to the Fake Doctors, Real Friends, the Scrubs rewatch podcast.
Oh yeah.
And so Donald Faison, who played Turk, was like one of the biggest Star Wars fans. The point where one of them and him and one of their producers would just talk about Star Wars, and then Zach Braff would just like check out for a little while. So after knowing that, then Zach Braff gets to be in Obi Wan Kenobi. Like what?
Donald Faison actually has been in a Star Wars project.
He has.
Yes, he played
Go
played
ahead.
the voice of, I can't remember his name because honestly it wasn't that good. It was this short run Star Wars animated show called Star Wars Resistance, and he played a voice in there. I personally would like to see him come back with a little bit more dignified role.
But Zach Braff was Freck, that like monster looking guy who was a pro Empire who picked up Leia and Obi-Wan.
See, I heard someone, I don't remember who called it this, but they said it sounded like Zach Braff doing a Seth Rogen impersonation.
I can see
and
that.
I didn't know that was actually Zach Braff, although his voice, it sounds familiar.
Yeah. So I have something to say to the whole nitpicking thing, like with the gate.
Yeah.
To me, I looked at it from a different perspective. I think when we're watching movies, it's hard, or TV shows, it's hard because we could have an eagle-eyed view of everything going on, whereas these characters are immersed in the moment. And I'm not justifying any kind of weird errors. I'm a detail guy, so even with that gate, I would have been like, "Hey guys, can we extend it up and then this way and that way?" Just because I think about that kind of stuff. But I looked at it after the fact when I noticed people pointing it out online, and I was like, "Yeah, I think we've all been there, where we get so caught up in the moment, our adrenaline's pumping, and there's an easier way to do something, and we realize that after we do it, and we're like, yeah." So when I saw that and I saw people point it out, I was like, yeah, Obi-Wan, I too have been there, where I do something that seems very unreasonable.
I just don't know if it was like there was too many things that didn't pass the smell test in this one, or if I was just for some reason being unnecessarily nitpicky. I mean, like the walking out with Leia underneath your cloak. Like
I thought that was funny. Like it was
is...
like it's crazy what you. I mean, like it's crazy what you can get away with when people are frantically like on high alert. You know, like I infiltrate bases all the time, apparently, with the way I'm talking about this.
I mean, to be fair, what else was he supposed to do? Reva's like, I can't believe I fell for Muppet Man.
Yeah.
I was refraining from making the Muppet Man reference, but
I got your back. I'm doing it just to show you my wealth of knowledge of Muppets.
I know that comes from your favorite Muppet movie, but that's an episode. That's a preview for like 3 or 4 weeks from now when we actually talk about Muppets.
Yeah,
we are having one finally. We've talked about Muppets in a lot of episodes, but never a full Muppet episode. So
you guys got to make that happen then.
Yeah,
aren't they doing a Muppet show?
Yeah, the new one's coming out. It's going to be Muppet Mayhem. It's going to be about the Electric Mayhem.
See, there you go.
So, and I thought that I had, just jokingly, people are always upset about all the different edits of Star Wars and the different versions of it they made. And I know that George Lucas isn't even in charge of it anymore, but my thought was like, watch next year you watch Disney Plus, and they're going to have Lola, the little droid, like inserted into like Empire Strikes Back or something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
that's true. What do you think would make Star Wars fans more upset? 3 shows in a row only on Tatooine, a Disney Plus series following the Emperor in between episodes 8 and 9, or a series about Jar Jar Binks in the Senate?
I mean, probably Jar Jar Binks in the Senate. I think, to me, you said following the Emperor between 8 and 9. I was like, that sounds actually kind of interesting. Because there's a lot that happens.
You would hope so.
Yeah.
It just shows like him on like a Xerox machine, just like clone after clone, and that's the show.
Yeah.
Well, there you go, Jar Jar. I actually would be. I don't know why. I feel like it would be really funny to see a Jar Jar in the Senate show. Like it might be terrible, but I could also see him going the other way and making like a workplace comedy, like a Parks and Rec, but with Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah,
because Jar Jar isn't as beloved. Like I think other franchises, like Toy Story, even though Forky is a dumb character from Toy Story 4, he resonated with kids. So then they had that Forky Asks Questions shorts on Disney Plus, which I never watched. If Jar Jar
They're
Binks,
pretty funny.
yeah, you got kids, but
I do.
well, so do I, but mine's older. But like if Jar Jar Binks was like a childhood favorite that like kids loved, I could see them absolutely doing that. But like even kids don't like Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah. So I think that would just be a waste of time and money, you know. Yeah, I think if I can kind of go back to what you were talking about at the beginning about how you're kind of Disneyed out, right? I think a lot of it, and I've never been one to be like one of those big Kathleen Kennedy haters. I appreciate she's made some good calls, but she's also made some bad calls. And I think there's a couple of things, and but the big one is that Kathleen Kennedy is not. She's a producer, and I have a lot of respect for her, but she's not like Dave Filoni or Jon Favreau, where they're also filmmakers. Like they're in it, they're actually directing these films or TV shows, writing them. She's not that. And I think that's the difference between George Lucas and her. George Lucas over Lucasfilm versus her over Lucasfilm is that's the difference, is that George Lucas did have, a rich knowledge of mythology and film and TV and pop culture, and the things he liked, he put into these stories, and he was the author of these things, right? Whereas Kathleen Kennedy is just here to steward this and bring in filmmakers that she thinks would be a good fit. But even when she brought in Phil Lord and Chris Miller into Solo, I was like, I like them, but I was like, yeah, really, that's an interesting choice. And I got to tell you, I was one of the first people. I like Taika Waititi, but when she announced that they were going to bring a Taika Waititi to do a Star Wars movie, I was like, ooh, I don't know about that. And then after seeing Thor: Love and Thunder, I'm especially just like, please don't make it. Please just don't.
Well, this might give some indication too of his wealth of knowledge in the Star Wars universe. He asked Natalie Portman after their filming, he's like, do you want to be in Star Wars movie I'm filming? And she's like, be in another Star Wars movie? He's like, oh yeah, you were in those.
As like a pretty big role too.
Yeah, one of the big three in that trilogy.
Yeah.
I don't know, guys.
I just got to say really quick, and I don't know if you guys touched on this. I'm sure you did in your Thor: Love and Thunder podcast. It was just annoying. Like we see her going to see Mjolnir at the New Asgard, then all of a sudden she just shows up in battle. It's like, what? Yep. Maybe it's like you just kind of like I feel like they should have had a little bit of build up.
Yeah, there was so much that fell with that movie, and like I was talking to some people who love Guardians of the Galaxy 2. I'm like, okay, Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is good, but it had the same problem that Thor: Love and Thunder had, except for Thor did it worse, is that they laughed at their own jokes. They were like, we can't just let the joke be funny. We're going to try really, really hard to say, hey, look at this. This is funny.
And wink at the camera and be like, do you see what we did?
Yeah. At least the jokes in Guardians 2 were actually funny. Yeah. These were not.
But Guardians 2 is a far better movie than Thor: Love and Thunder.
1000% agree.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So there's a big issue with, and I say this a lot when I'm talking to people about Star Wars, where I put people in two different camps. There are people who like Star Wars, and there are people who get Star Wars. And if I can use some directors that have been involved in Star Wars projects to put them in these camps, Rian Johnson definitely likes Star Wars. He doesn't understand it, because if he understood it, he wouldn't have made a lot of the decisions he made in The Last Jedi. Love it or hate it. I'm not somebody who's like a fundamental hate it Last Jedi person, but there are some things from a mythological kind of standpoint, the mythology of Star Wars, that I'm like, you kind of missed it. And I kind of feel like he came at it from a perspective of really wanting to kind of just do his own thing, and that's all well and good, but it shouldn't have been in one of the saga films. So And then a good example of somebody who gets Star Wars is Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau. Those two guys, that first episode of The Mandalorian, I was like, these guys get it. They get it. The tone, there's a rhythm to Star Wars. And so I think I'm almost done, but I have to kind of set up another thing. So with Taika Waititi, he directed the season finale of Mandalorian season 1, which was a great episode.
Yeah.
But there were a couple of moments in there where I was like, that was Taika Waititi. And there's like the scene with like the scout troopers, they're shooting the can thing and they're missing. And the whole joke is that stormtroopers can't hit anything. And to me, it was a funny bit, but it was like, that's like bordering on a little too self-aware with Star Wars. And I let it go because the rest of the episode was pretty solid. But he even said there was like a behind the scenes thing on Disney Plus. They do like the Disney Gallery, I think is what it's called. And it was about the Mandalorian. And he said, Dave Filoni was instrumental for me because he kind of reined me in. He kind of helped kind of be like, maybe you shouldn't do that joke because it won't really land with Star Wars. It's not. But the problem is that Dave Filoni is really busy now. And the odds of him being able to rein Taika Waititi in are pretty minimal. And my question is this: should we be hiring directors that need to be reined in? I think maybe we should be bringing in people who understand Star Wars versus like it. And I don't know. It's hard to say, like, it sounds a little self-righteous to then be like, oh, I've deemed that this person gets it and this person likes it. You know, that's so I don't really know if you can really put a formula to it to kind of create a solution, but it just seems like Taika Waititi was not the obvious choice for me to bring into Star Wars, even from a non-film producer. I'm just some guy, you know. So
well, you do bring a good point because if it's a one-off movie that's it's not part of any series, the director can make it completely their own. They can make it darker, gritty, whatever. But when you have a franchise that's already been set, and this is the tone of these movies, I mean, you can still put your own mark on it as a director, but you still need to be able to like have it be believable that this would happen within that same world.
Right. Yeah. Which was the issue with Thor: Love and Thunder, in my opinion. They were like, oh, you liked Ragnarok? Okay, Taika, you got a blank check. And it was obvious he had a blank check because it felt very detached from the whole of the cinematic universe for me, the Marvel Cinematic Universe for me. So
yeah, because Ragnarok was a really good mix of the both. It did definitely feel like Taika, and that's why it was a little bit of a departure, but there was such a pleasant like surprise and a taste of that film and his filmmaking in it that it ended up working really well.
It did.
And it kind of launched this whole idea of like, they had been doing a lot more color schemes, but like he really just brought it as a comic book movie. That was one of the first Marvel movies. I'm like, yeah, this is a comic book movie. It feels like that.
Yeah.
Really like this conversation though, because like I like to think of, well, what about some of these other Star Wars directors? Because I would actually argue too that both Bryce Dallas Howard and even J.J. Abrams get Star Wars. I know J.J. Abrams had a couple missteps in Star Wars 9, and that's completely fine, however you feel, but he definitely did get it, because part of Star Wars is it's not that self-aware like you're talking about with Taika. It's the like, this is just, we accept this. And so like there's a couple of those lines that people hated of like the somehow Palpatine returned, and it's like, they don't know how he returned, and there is a weird mysticism. It's ridiculous that he returned, but this is the Star Wars universe, and ridiculous things do happen, and so of course they don't have an explanation for it.
Sure.
Not that was the best way that they could have written that line.
Sure.
Well, and didn't they do the same thing with saying, "Oh no, Darth Maul's not dead," because fans love him.
Yeah. They never. It was he was alive. He had willed himself to stay alive through the dark side, and which they kind of like are reinforcing now with. There's been a lot of characters in the expanded universe. Like Darth Sion, for any of those nerdy people out there that know who that is, shout out to the Darth Sion fans. But he was completely held together by his hatred, and that's really the thing that moves forward. And I actually heard a great explanation about you brought in on a Star Wars fan. We're gonna get nerdy, okay? I heard a great explanation about the immortality of Jedi versus Sith constantly not dying from stab wounds, basically. And actually, I heard a great explanation. I was like, yeah, I totally didn't think about this. The thing that it makes Jedi and Sith unique, among other things, is that Jedi, they become one with the Force, whereas Sith have completely cut themselves off from that. They're basically the equivalent of rocket fuel. So it's just they're in the moment. Once they die, they're dead. They've completely sacrificed that becoming one with the Force for the sake of power and their greed for power. So of course they're going to will themselves to stay alive as long as possible. Whereas a Jedi may find peace in the fact that I've received a mortal wound. I'm going to now become one with the Force. Because I know I'm moving on to a better place. Whereas a Sith will themselves to stay alive as long as possible, even surviving being cut in half. so
how do you feel about a potential like reveal of Mace Windu being,
I was just going to say that,
alive, but he has gone to the dark side because of the anger of betrayal that led to him dying, and then seeing all this Jedi around, that he was like held on to that instead of becoming one with the Force, and it tapped in the dark side. How do you feel about that?
Okay, I get why people would want to see that. But I just think they should let him be dead. Like, we've had so many people be like, haha, you thought I was dead, but I'm not. And it's like, yeah, but like, I don't know, man. I mean, if they do it right, I'm willing to hear it out, but I would prefer to just keep Mace Windu dead. I'm in that camp. It'd
be really muddy to be like, well, where can we bring him back? He said, and they'd say, well, I wasn't interfering with anything because I was off during this. It just would be muddy.
Exactly. He was dead the whole time.
The more people you bring up from pre-Jedi Purge, pre-Empire, the more of those people you bring back. You have to answer the question of, well, where were they during the reign of the Empire? Where were they during the original trilogy? Because that was pretty significant. So
I would like to see some backstory. Maybe we'll do this in Mando 3. Some backstory about Grogu in the temple and how he escaped and who helped and that whole story there.
I think that'd be great. Yeah.
And while we're somewhere on the subject also, Matt, so I don't know if you watch Stranger Things, Jeff, but so if you get cut in half and you have a lot of hatred, you can come back. So what does that mean for?
Yeah, I only saw the first. Okay, I'll give you a disclaimer. I only saw the first 2 episodes of the most recent season because I have a hard time seeing kids getting seeing them get like turned into pretzels because of Vecna. I'm like, whoa. I was like, these are kids. I was like, that really bothered me. And then I just kind of turned it off after that.
It's very visceral. I
hear that the ending of it is really good. I hear that, the rest of the season is good. I do know who is because I do care about these characters and I kept tabs, and he's the guy that gets cut in half from Vecna at the end, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's true. We moved on before I could even make my joke about like if you wanting to summon Samuel L. Jackson, all you have to do is turn off the lights, look in a mirror, and say, "What's in your wallet?" 3 times fast, and he just pops up behind you.
Yeah.
Wow. This episode's got away from us. I love your Star Wars nerdiness. I love having it here because you can go a lot more in depth than either of us can go. And why do a podcast if you're not going to actually go in depth? So that's what we're here for. And that's why we've got our Muppet fan in a couple of weeks who all the way from Canada is going to join us, and we're really going to nerd out.
That's great.
Is an episode all you Muppet fans.
I'm sure Brian is just like just ready. He's ready.
It's actually one of my old youth leaders, and I was like, if we're doing a Muppet episode, she's the one.
Awesome.
And I'll just give this tangential stuff like, well, I know who Miss Piggy is.
Yeah,
I tell you what, speaking of Muppets, I'm currently adapting A Christmas Carol for us to do locally for community theater, which, by the way, just got done hot off the presses of doing Matilda the musical.
Yeah,
And so that was something. I hopefully you guys got to go see it. If we talked about it too, if you are like one of those really awesome people that listen to this and movies on a Monday, that's why you haven't seen too much movies on a Monday the last couple of weeks. Have been pretty busy. But
Yeah,
anyway,
and on our podcast we've had to reschedule like every week the past month.
Yes, but I'm adapting Christmas Carol, and like as I'm typing it, there's so many times I'm like, my brain just goes to Muppet Christmas Carol. That is like my default, and I even have the book in front of me, like I'm reading it. And I'm still, because the Muppets did a really good job of following the source material. That is like, this is like the same exact.
It's one
thing.
of it's my definitive.
Yeah,
Christmas Carol.
You know, this is actually a good place to plug this. There's a Muppet podcast called Moving Right Along. It's hosted by some guys from toughpigs.com, which they are to me as I am to you as far as Muppet fandom. And they've been going through for years. They're doing every Muppet movie 2 minutes at a time. And they just got to Muppet Christmas Carol.
Ooh.
Wow.
It's exciting.
2 minutes at a time.
Yep.
That's crazy, man. Crazy.
But Jeff, you know, you're like, your brain's turning like, how can I do that with Star Wars? How can I get there?
There's already a Star Wars one called Star Wars Minute. They got their idea from the Star Wars Minute podcast.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Star Wars Minute actually is now Star Wars Explained.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah. Did they get through them all then?
Yeah. Or maybe actually, well, maybe they're a new podcast, because Star Wars Minute changed into Star Wars Explained, which probably reopened that Star Wars Minute name. So maybe it's a different one. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I would do one called Back in Time for Back in the Future.
Yeah. The best Star Wars podcast out there, bar none, is Rebel Force Radio. So anybody who wants to like really get into Star Wars lore, and you don't have anybody to talk about Star Wars with, because for me, what happened was, it was back in 2006, Rogue One had come out, and I was just on cloud nine. I just loved that movie. It ticked all the right boxes for me, and I had nobody that wanted to keep talking about it. I was like, because I worked at Trader Joe's, and we would set up in the morning, because I open and you could put an earbud in and listen to whatever you wanted. And so I was like, there's got to be a Star Wars podcast out there. I need to at least like pretend like I feel like I'm talking to people about Star Wars. And then there was a Star Wars Roundtable, where it was the two hosts, Jason and Jimmy, and they had some of because they're really well connected in the Star Wars universe, like the production. So they brought in some different filmmakers and artists and things like that. And they had a roundtable discussion about Rogue One. And I was like, my people, this is what I'm talking about. And then it started. So if anybody, wants, they're in the same boat, and you just feel like you need to get some stuff off your chest, or at least feel like you are, Rebel Force Radio, great.
I could tell when you were starting that this was a cry from your own personal heart. If you're like me and you want people, just anyone, to talk about Star Wars,
1-800.
There's a website. Go get some help. People are standing by to talk to you right now.
Yep.
Sarah McLachlan playing in the background.
Yep.
All right. Well, anything else that you guys have to add about Kenobi, or apparently Muppets, wherever we're at now?
I came into this thing, I'm not going to mention Muppets at all, and you both mentioned Muppets for me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Jeff, we're stumbling blocks for Brian. We're causing him to sin. So sorry, Brian.
Sorry, man. Sorry. You didn't bring it up though, so kudos.
There you go.
Yeah. No, I will say just definitively, I liked Kenobi, and I think I'm going to be in the same boat as I was with the Book of Boba Fett. As time goes on, I'm going to appreciate it more and more. And I think, I just have a philosophy where you just dismiss the stuff you don't like and hold on to the stuff you do. And often when you do that, for me, I find that given enough time, I end up just appreciating the thing for what it's worth. So, person who called me out last time, I think you'll find it was a lot more fair. I loved, especially that last episode of Kenobi. I was just like beaming. Like when you see the Emperor, I was like, and seeing Ian McDiarmid as the Emperor again, and seeing the Anakin Vader scene. I thought it was just an amazing scene. And then Qui-Gon, that was amazing. So I was a happy nerd.
And Jeff, if you want to criticize that listener, go listen to our Ted Lasso episode. You can make fun of him too.
Okay.
That's the one. I would like to make a recommendation, because especially towards the beginning of this the series, where they're talking about this theme that I really love, like the Jedi, just this itch to be that help and to save people, like to do what's right. They can't help themselves. I really love that ideal. I wish they would have explored it a little bit more, and been a little bit more on the nose of it. But I find that was really handled well in the video game Star Wars Fallen Order. And it feels like the very beginning of that video game feels very similar to the very beginning of Kenobi, and then the branches path very differently. But I would very much encourage you, play that game if you've liked this Kenobi and you wanted to see a little bit more in that time period. Go play that game.
So really quick, you just brought up something else that I have to say, because I'm just like, ugh. So I was one of those people that wasn't really, I wasn't that hung up on the whole Rey in The Force Awakens, Rey picking up the lightsaber and fighting. I was like, she's obviously Force sensitive. She knows how to fight. She's clearly got to be powerful if she can jump in that quickly. To me, I loved Obi Wan Kenobi. You seeing him, he was really rusty, and then by the end, he was actually more powerful than he was in the Revenge of the Sith. And it shows it reinforces the reality that what makes a Jedi is his connection to the Force, not his skill. Obviously, skill is good, but to me, I loved that. I thought that was, as he pursued the Force, he became stronger in the Force. As he opened himself up again to that, he became stronger and stronger. I thought that was great, personally. So to me, it helped reinforce even Rey. And that's like a whole episode in of itself. But to me, it helped kind of soften that a little bit for maybe some people. I don't know. Yeah. So yeah,
that's a great spot to end to, especially because we're all Christians. I think there's a very good biblical message hidden in that theme as well for us, and so I'll let you unpack that on your own and give us feedback as well. Thanks again to Jeff. He is on, you can find him on YouTube, Elijah Fire, and sometimes steps in to host Elijah streams as well. But that's probably going to be more rare and rare, because Kelsey does a great job as well.
Should we jump into trivia?
Oh yeah, we do have that, don't we?
Yeah.
I completely forgot about trivia.
Yeah, you're doing the wrap-ups. I'm like,
I did the wrap-up. You're like, hey, that's why you're here. Keep me in place.
So last week we had Dan on talking about Stranger Things 4, and he answered, so Jeff, see if you know this. He asked, who was the first character to die in Stranger Things?
It's the scientist. The scientist gets yanked up at the beginning. He gets yanked up by the Demogorgon.
Right. But what he meant when he asked after that, we clarified, because he said this, is he wanted to know what's the first named character who dies. Do we remember that?
Barb?
No, before Barb.
Really? Oh, hold on, man. I've seen that first season so many times.
It's a really good season.
Yeah.
I'm blanking on
I don't know
the person's name right now.
It's Benny.
That's right, Benny.
Benny from Benny's Burgers, who found 11.
For some reason, I was thinking of the person killed by the Demogorgon. That's what. Yes, I actually did think about him too, but I was like, no. Yeah. So.
And then we didn't talk about this. Does anybody have Obi Wan Kenobi trivia? I'm sure you guys can think of something.
I can. Give me a sec. What is the name of? Just that quick. What is the name of in Attack of the Clones? What is the name of Obi Wan Kenobi's droid that follows him on his starfighter?
I think I actually know this.
Love it. I
think I know this.
Oh man, Brian, you're gonna
you don't
beat
have
me.
to give the full name. You can just give the first half of the name.
Yes. Okay, that's good, because I don't know the full one. I know the half.
Okay. Is it Jerry?
Bink, you got it.
I knew it.
And that's why people hated the prequels. No.
Come, Jerry.
Yeah.
Beep, beep, boo, boo.
Yeah.
That's a droid sound. All right. Well, once again, thanks to Jeff. Thanks also to Brian, because he's great. And I don't thank him ever publicly. Usually it's more shaming, but today I'm feeling benevolent. So, again, you can follow us on. We have our podcast on all the streaming services: Spotify, Audible, Apple Podcast. You can follow us through Podomatic. You can go on Twitter to TV Guys. Are we TV Guys 1 there?
Yep.
I know these things.
You made it.
I made it.
And if any of you guys know how to build a website, get in contact with us, because I bought the domain name, but we don't know how to build a website.
I know a little how to build a website, but if you don't want it to look like a GeoCities from 1990s, we should get someone a little better than that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, until next time, though, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Jeff.
I'm reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.